The first thing she felt was not the pain, but the shocking intimacy of it. A stranger's hand, rough and demanding, clamped around her throat, squeezing not just the air from her windpipe, but the very illusion of safety from her world. For one endless second, all she could see were his triumphant, merciless eyes, believing he had complete power over her. He had no idea he was holding onto a lit fuse. Where were you the moment you realized you were stronger than anyone, including yourself, ever believed you could be? Before we dive into this unbelievable true story of the day a high school hallway became a battlefield, make sure you're subscribed. What unfolds in the next few minutes will forever change the way you see the quietest person in the room. The fluorescent lights of Northwood High hummed a constant, low-grade note of anxiety, a sound as familiar as the slamming of lockers and the shrill of the passing bell. It was in this river of backpacks, hormones, and fleeting dreams that Maya Evans tried to be a ghost. She was the girl you might pass 100 times and never truly see. At 19, she was beautiful in a way that seemed to apologize for itself, with hair the color of winter sunshine streaked with rich, dark brown, like roots finally pushing through to the surface. Her eyes, a shifting mix of blue and gray, often held a distant, wary look, as if she were perpetually braced for a noise only she could hear. She had a soft, curvy physique that her oversized sweaters and worn jeans did little to accentuate, a body that spoke more of comfort than of the lethal geometry it contained. Today, like every day, she moved with a deliberate quietness, her head slightly bowed, a worn copy of East of Eden held tightly to her chest like a shield. She was navigating the chaotic current of students, her focus on the door to her history class, a sanctuary just 50 feet away. The hallway was a tapestry of teenage life, a couple arguing by the water fountain, a group of freshmen giggling over a phone, posters for the upcoming spring dance screaming in neon pink. And then there was Jake. Jake McCullough was Northwood's golden curse. His varsity jacket, a garish tapestry of blue and yellow felt, was a uniform of untouchable authority. His blonde hair was perpetually perfect, his jawline sharp enough to cut the school's funding issues. He moved through the halls not like a student, but like a landlord inspecting his property, his laughter a loud, performative sound that made lesser boys shrink and girls either blush or look away in fear. His posse, a collection of lesser jocks who mirrored his every swagger, trailed behind him like pilot fish. Maya saw him a moment too late. She'd been trying to avoid him since the previous week, when he'd accidentally bumped into her in the cafeteria, sending her tray of spaghetti clattering to the floor, his apology a mocking sneer as his friends howled with laughter. She'd simply knelt, cleaned the mess with trembling hands, and said nothing. Silence, her father had taught her, was the deepest ocean, but predators interpret silence as an invitation. Jake's eyes, small and calculating, locked onto her, a smirk played on his lips. Well, look what the cat dragged in. Or did you drag the cat, Maya? You look like you wrestle with alley cats for fun. His friends chuckled on cue. Maya tried to sidestep him, her heart beginning a frantic drum against her ribs. I'm late, Jake. Please. Her voice was barely a whisper. Please. He mocked, stepping directly into her path, his broad shoulders blocking the fluorescent light. You say please so nice. But you know what? I don't think you're sorry. I think you think you're better than everyone. Walking around with your nose in a book, too good to talk to anyone. The injustice of it was a physical blow. She kept her eyes down, on the scuffed toes of his expensive sneakers. Just let me go. The air around them began to change. The river of students slowed, then pooled into an audience. Phones, those modern-day witness stands, were subtly raised. Everyone knew the script. Jake was the star, and Maya was the prop. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous, intimate level. You know, my boy Tyler over there said you looked at him funny last period. You think you can give my friend dirty looks. This was a complete fabrication, a flimsy pretext for the violence he was itching to unleash. Before she could form a denial, his right hand shot out. It wasn't a shove, it was a grab. His fingers, thick and strong from years of weightlifting and football, clamped around her throat. The world stopped. The hum of the lights vanished, replaced by a roaring silence in her ears. Her book fell to the linoleum floor with a dull final thud. Her own hands came up not to fight, but in a primal, terrified gesture of surrender, hovering in the air, palms open. Her blue-gray eyes widened, swimming with pure unadulterated terror. Her mouth opened slightly, a silent gasp for the air his grip was already beginning to constrict. He leaned in, his face inches from hers, his breath smelling of cheap energy drink. He was 100% confident, a king imposing his will. He owned this hallway. He owned this school. He owned her. The smirk was still there, the smirk of a boy who had never, ever faced a consequence. This was the image burned into the retinas of every onlooker, the bully and his victim, a perfect, tragic tableau of high school hierarchy. But deep within Maya, in a place far below the terror, a switch was flipped. It was not a decision. It was a reaction, as involuntary as a knee jerking after a hammer tap. The fear in her eyes didn't vanish, it was incinerated. In its place, a cold, terrifying calm descended. The world, which had shrunk to the feeling of his fingers on her neck, suddenly expanded into a series of data points. Target throat grab. Aggressor's posture forward, leaning, weight on front foot. Secondary threats 2 accomplices at 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. Environment slippery floor, lockers to the left, open space to the right. Time seemed to warp, stretching like taffy. The half-second that followed was a lifetime of training compressed into a single, flawless action. Her left hand came up and over his wrist, not to pull it away, but to trap it, to anchor his offending limb to her neck. At the exact same moment, her body dropped, not away from him, but into him. She used his own forward momentum against him, becoming a dead weight that pulled him off balance. A guttural sound, more shock than pain, escaped his lips. His smirk shattered into a mask of confusion. The students watching, phones held high, felt the shift before they understood it. The energy in the hallway transformed from voyeuristic anticipation to electric, breathless shock. This was not in the script. Maya's right arm, now free, became a piston. She didn't make a fist. In Krav Maga, you don't break your delicate hand bones on the hard points of a skull. You use the weapons nature gave you. Her elbow, a hard, bony point, drove backward into his ribs. There was a sickening, wet crack that echoed in the sudden silence. Jake grunted, the air exploding from his lungs. His grip on her throat loosened for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. Pivoting on the ball of her foot, she spun out of his grasp, her movement a blur of practiced efficiency. She was now facing him, her stance wide and low, her hands up, not in fear, but in a ready, open-palmed guard. Her eyes were no longer terrified. They were flat, empty, and focused. They were the eyes of a predator. Jake staggered back, clutching his ribs, his face a contorted mess of pain and disbelief. The humiliation was a fire in his veins, hotter than the physical agony. "You bitch!" he snarled, and lunged at her again, a wild telegraphed haymaker aimed at her head. It was the move of an amateur, all anger and no technique. To Maya, it was moving in slow motion. She deflected the punch with her forearm, the impact a dull thud that barely registered. Her other hand shot out, fingers stiff, and struck him directly in the throat, a controlled, non-lethal impact, just enough to crush his windpipe and send him stumbling back, gagging and choking. His eyes bulging in panic. He crashed into a bank of lockers.